Welcome to discoveringcommunities.org and Self-Discovery Media. We are knowledge sharers. The Orchard of Wisdom podcasts guide you on your journey to self-discovery with a library of knowledge from people who have lived it, felt it, and now share it. Do enjoy our next show, and do come and visit discoveringcommunities.org to see what else we have for you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to Discovering Communities, where you are in self-discovery of yourself. We are here to share with you today about discovering about becoming a humanitarian. My guest is Mark Balla, discovering his humanitarianism, and I am your host, Sarah Troy. You know, telling a story that invites and inspires us is what we do here at discoveringcommunities.org. And it's always wonderful to make that discovery of somebody's trip that they have made in that self-discovery. And Mark Balla's was an unexpected discovery, a discovery that was to turn his world upside down. He was so shaken by what he learned that he felt unable to simply walk away. So what is it that he learned? What journey did he take that has led him on his path now into humanitarianism? And, you know, something about humanitarianism is something we need to see a great deal more out there at the present moment, folks. But he's also done a wonderful book called The Toilet Warrior. And we're going to find out about that book as well and what that means. So let's dive right in. And thank you for being a humanitarian, Mark, and for taking this journey and allowing it to tap you on the shoulder and redirect you, because we certainly do need an awful lot more people in the world that care. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Sarah. It's great to be here, and all the way from Melbourne, across
Yeah.
the ocean to you.
Yes.
Very exciting to have a chance to tell my story to your listeners and your viewers.
A lot of people think humanitarianism is that that is kind of soppy and syrupy and like, oh, you know, I've even been accused of being a communist because of my humanitarianism. And I think it's very, very misunderstood, isn't it? And it's, I think, just being of service of humanity, and you find which is your gift that you're going to share, you know, which is your platform. Take us a little bit down before you discovered your platform.
Yeah, well, actually, just a quick comment on what you said there, that people accusing you of being a communist. I have friends who are right-wing and friends who are left-wing on the political spectrum who also have very strong humanitarian aspects to their lives, regardless of their political persuasion. So, yes, that accusation of being a communist is certainly not well-founded.
Not well-founded, no. Ignorant
No.
one, because people don't really understand about what humanitarianism is about.
Correct. So I used to be in business. I had a business manufacturing CDs and DVDs here in Australia when it was still a very good idea to be doing that.
Yes.
Not a good idea anymore.
No.
Fortunately, I got out at the right time. I got out at the peak of the industry. But before getting out of it, I started doing some business in India with an Australian partner that set up a joint venture manufacturing DVDs for the Bollywood market. And they asked me to join the board. So I then started traveling back and forth to India quite a lot. I was there 4 times a year for a number of years. I think I've probably been to India more than 40, 45 times
Wow.
now. And it was on one of these trips that I made this discovery that you alluded to before. And I guess the title of my book that you mentioned, Toilet Warrior, kind of gives people an inkling as to what kind of stuff we might be talking about during this conversation.
We're going to be flushing a few things out.
That's right. Let's dive head first into the toilet, shall we?
Well, we talk about a lot of things being in the toilet, but when you're talking about India, people really don't know that there are very few public toilets out there, aren't there?
Yeah, look, when I first started traveling to India, this situation of lack of access to sanitation was a huge problem. And as a tourist, you never really saw it. Or as a traveling business person, you never saw it. You might be on a train or in a taxi or a car going through the countryside, and you'll notice someone going to the toilet in the fields, but then you don't really think about it. You move on. And in fact, most Western travelers who've been to the third world have seen that kind of stuff, but not really taken it on board. And I was given an unusual opportunity where I ended up taking that issue on board.
And having done a show on this under my Eco Solutions, of how many kids don't go to school because there's no toilets for them,
Yeah.
of how many mainstream people even, all have to hold it all day long, and kidney problems, etc. And that you think in such a high populated country that, sanitation would be a top of the board, but there's a lot of corruption, and money that's being designated for it doesn't always reach it. So, and of course the Ganges, seems to become the toilet bowl. So is it an economic problem? Is it a political problem?
It's a complicated problem. India is obviously a country with a very diverse culture. One of the things that people in the West don't understand very well is the caste system. And the caste system is one of the causes of the problem that you see among the poorer people in particular, having poor access to sanitation in particular, and to clean water and so on. And you're right, you mentioned schools. That's actually where I discovered the issue of poor sanitation, when someone took me to a school in a slum, and there were no teenage girls in the school. They'd all dropped out because of lack of toilets.
Yeah. And you just think about that, not being able to go to school just because there's no toilet. In the Western world, it just wouldn't be, what the hell are you talking about? But that is a reality over there, and it's a very large reality, isn't it?
It is. Look, I have to say it's improving. The work that we've been doing since I was taken to that school has been a small part of it. We've been a catalyst in some areas, but also the Indian government, the current Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, who is from, I guess you would say, from a right-wing party, so a good example of right-wing still having a humanitarian heart. He started a program called Swachh Bharat, which means Clean India, and through the Swachh Bharat program in the last 4 or 5 years, they've been involved in funding the construction of 94 million toilets in households around India, with heavy subsidies from the Indian government, which really has made that construction possible. So they're doing a lot of work. In fact, Mr. Modi referred to Gandhi, of course the great Indian hero who was involved in the time that India became independent. And Gandhi actually said that sanitation is more important than independence.
Yes.
People
Actually,
didn't listen to him at the time.
no, and unfortunately, it always takes people 50, 40, 60 years to catch up.
That's right.
And I did an entire series on vaccinations, and we were looking at actually, where pandemics come from. And, sometimes, it could be a wrong drug, or, we've got the coronavirus out there right now, but it really stems back down to hygiene. And the reason why we saw so much of it in the past was there was no running water, there was no emphasis on cleaning hands, there was no sanitation, and so things just fermented. And this is what caused a great deal of the diseases to go out there. And we don't realize, right now, that the whole emphasis on wash your hands, don't touch your face, make sure the surfaces are kept clean, the only way you can prevent the coronavirus. But that should be common sense. And very often it isn't, is it?
It should be. And unfortunately, there's some statistics out there that'll make a few of your listeners cringe, probably most particularly the women. But apparently 65% of men don't wash their hands after using a public toilet.
Shake it out.
Well, that's right. More shocking than that is apparently 35% of women don't either.
Yes. And let's stop and think for a moment. They're touching the handles, right? And then they're touching something else, and then they're touching something else. And this virus we know right now is shiny handles, doorknobs, and everything bound. So here we are in supposedly a sophisticated world, where a country as big and as enriched as India is only now catching up with sanitation, and flushing toilets, which in the Western world we've known for over 100 years, and just think everybody has it. But we're also now having to re-educate people purely on the hygiene of washing hands.
Yes, and in fact, a big part of the work we're doing in India in schools, apart from providing toilets where they're needed, is about teaching the kids proper hygiene behavior, and particularly hand washing with soap.
Yes.
And what we're finding now in the places where we are working, the kids are actually now becoming better at hand washing than most of us in the West are.
Yeah.
I so often see people doing a perfunctory hand wash at the, when coming out of a public toilet, where they'll flick the tap on, they'll stick their hand under
Yeah.
for a second, flick the tap off, and they think they washed their hands.
Yeah.
In fact, all they've done by doing that is make their hands wet, making it easier to pick up stuff that's on the nearby surface.
Yes.
You
Yes.
need to do it properly. It needs to be they talk about the sing happy birthday twice.
Yeah.
Wash your
And
hands with, and it's
overhand,
really, that's
underhand.
right.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right. And in the middle, under the
Yeah.
nails and so on.
Hmm.
And it's really so often about, it's not about keeping the tap running as well. I went to a school in Cambodia a few years ago, and the kids asked if I could wash my hands, and they had a container about, I don't know, it's probably a couple of gallons of water, and they had a bar of soap. So I grabbed the bar of soap, I turned the tap on and started rubbing my hands together under the tap, and the kids looked at their teacher just horrified.
Yeah.
And
You're
I
out of
realized,
water.
I've left the tap running.
Yes.
They don't have that sort of free
Right.
access to water like we do. So I quickly turned the tap off, and then got suds on my hand, and got the suds going for 15, 20 seconds, and the kids started looking relieved again. And then I rinsed the suds off. And it's like, that's how we should all be washing our
Yes.
hands, because you've
Yeah.
got the tap running all the time. You're not giving the soap the chance to do its proper abrasive work of getting stuff off
And
your
it,
hands
it doesn't
properly.
matter where you are in the world, water is going to become a shortage.
It
And so
is,
this is
yeah.
something we need to be mindful
Yes.
of,
That's right.
despite what they say.
Look, these children at the school in Cambodia, they could not believe that we go to the toilet in our drinking water
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
West, which is what we
Yes.
do. It's
Yes.
the same.
Yes.
Unless you're getting it out of a rainwater tank, that's what we're doing here. We are incredibly wasteful with this resource that is going to become more and more precious.
Yes. Well, Australia having just gone through all those fires,
Yes.
the amount of water it's going to take for regrowth. And of course, you went from fires to flooding in certain parts. And, we've got to understand that really Mama Earth is pissed off with us right now.
Yep.
And she's kicking up a fuss. And,
Yep.
I don't blame her, because as children of the earth, we have abused her,
Yep.
in so many ways. And I just think it's so sad, and in the day of computer intelligence, with so much education, with so many opportunities, with the internet and the information that's out there, that we are still so callous
Yes.
with the way we go about things, and that there are still countries out there that don't have the running water, that don't have the toilets. Many places
Yes.
in Africa don't either.
Of course.
And,
Yeah.
it's what's going on. Why are
Yep.
we investing in wars when we should be investing in countries to have those basic needs?
That's right. Yep. I'm a big fan of the stuff you're saying there. I think that at the moment, it's as many as 2.5 billion people in the world don't have access to an acceptable standard of sanitation. The number changes from time to time, but that's basically been a fairly solid number for a number of years. We can't keep up with the population growth. Every time we add more toilets, or we're adding more people as well. We're just not keeping up. And water, 600 to 800 million people don't have access to clean drinking water.
Yeah, exactly.
And the flow-on effects are horrendous.
I did a show on migration, and that how much migration is actually going to be due with the weather changes. If you can't grow crops, then what are you going to do? You're going to migrate somewhere where you can. And then we're developing that problem. You digress from the need of toilet and sanitation, and this being your path, but really it's not just one thread, isn't it? It is
Correct.
a whole
It all
lot of
belongs
it
together.
yeah, it all
Yeah.
belongs together. And
Yeah.
um how can we could look at certain countries and say, oh, you got Ebola, you got this and that, but then look at the sanitation, and go, well, why did it happen? Because
Yeah.
the sanitation's not there, the education is not there.
Correct. It's look, it's a incredibly complex problem. And I think to suggest that it's caused by one issue only would be wrong. But I think the environmental issues are underlying so many problems that we face. I mean,
Yeah.
the lack of water is obviously very much tied into environmental issues. And look, I've even heard people suggesting this Ebola virus could be connected to environmental issues as well, simply
Hmm.
because human beings are expanding their footprint on the earth and removing some of the natural environment. And so the animals where this disease may have come from are now getting closer and closer to the people.
Yeah.
So
Do you mean the Ebola or the corona?
no, the coronavirus,
Right.
and the same with Ebola. As we live
Yes.
closer and closer to the source, it's more likely to get out.
And, this particular one, in the childhood shots vaccines they did, at that time, it was just when it was coming out, and they were talking about that they had tried, because coronavirus is like the flu virus in China, that they were talking about this virus as being an antivirus, a virus against the flu that went wrong.
Right.
And radically wrong, right? Which we don't know. But then they've come up with the market of exotic food meats. And, now you're talking about the animals that are just not designed for consumption. I don't think any animal should be anyway. I'm a plant-based person. But, they take these exotic animals and, and sell those on the market, a non-hygienic market at that. And
Yes.
this is kind of where they think the systemic has been caused there. So
Yeah.
will we ever know the truth? One doesn't know, because a lot always is covered up. But again, it goes back to logics. It's just because you can make a buck on selling something exotic doesn't mean you should buy it, or that we should even be allowing it to happen. But
No.
it
No.
does.
Look. Yes. It's a complicated world we're in. So much of what you're talking about, whether it's the vaccines or whether it's these animals and the unhygienic market, it keeps, for me, it keeps coming back to hygiene.
Yes.
Uh, and this issue of hand washing, I don't think we can drum it in enough.
No. And, I think that our kids, once they get it, they're the ones to remind the adults all the time. And I was catching a bus the other day, and this guy was doing with
No.
his nose, and then going like this with his arm, and then rubbing it on his things, and then getting on the bus. And so I've
Lovely.
been taking all public transit, whether it's warm out there or not, in gloves, making sure, and Perel and everything else, because that's exactly how things get passed on. And it's be mindful, right? And we're not. And I think sometimes it takes something like a pandemic scare to wake people up on just the everyday lack of hygiene that they're practicing.
Yeah. And look, you mentioned kids being a big part of the solution. In fact, if I can tell you a bit of an anecdote about a school that we've been working in India. This school had, it's got 1,500 children, mainly high school, a few younger kids, but mainly high school children. And when I first visited the school about 4 years ago, it had toilets of sort, but the condition was horrendous. The girls' toilets were too dangerous for me to go into because there were snakes
Wow.
throughout the toilets. The headmaster wouldn't let me go in, and yet the little girls were going in and out using it as a toilet.
Wait, what? The little girls can go in and you can't?
Yeah, that's right.
There's the value of
The
life there.
white man can't go in, but the little brown girls can go in. It's just unacceptable, horrible,
Oh, horrible.
very distressing. And when I eventually did go in, I filmed a bit, and the toilets had become unusable, and they would just go to the toilet on the floor. So they wanted somewhere private. That was the message there. They wanted somewhere not just outside in the wild. They wanted somewhere private, but the conditions of where they'd been going were just beyond the pale. So we decided to build toilets there. We built 33 new toilets in the school, and I've been back since. I went back a year later to look at them. The condition is wonderful. They're being used all the time. They're being cleaned properly. The kids have become part of that process. So when we built them, we sat down with the kids in groups and talked to them about the importance of looking after things that are important to them. And the toilets are important to them. They had to be responsible as well, not just the teachers, not just the cleaner. Like if you use a toilet, leave it how you found it, was kind of the message that we said to
Right.
them. And they've taken it on board so seriously. But then after we'd opened these toilets, we got the mayors of the 7 nearby villages to come and have a look. And they were all pretty impressed. And the kids were going home to their villages and telling mum and dad, we've got this at school, we want this at home as well. And it was about a year after we'd opened them. So, and this is, we opened them January last year. So just over a year ago. I was there in December last year. So 11 months after opening them. And we went down to visit the mayor of one of the villages just to see if there'd been any change in the village. And she was quite emotional. She said, you know, when you opened those toilets just on a year ago, uh, 70% of the people in our village had toilets. Within
Mm,
days of them opening, the kids were telling the other 30%, you've got to get toilets. And within 3 months, every family in the village had toilets. That was just the most dramatic outcome. And not just toilets, but they've also now put in hand washing
right.
capability, most of it by little canisters full of
Yeah.
water, which they refill. And the mayor has made sure that water is available for the families to refill a couple of times a week when they need to. So, you know, the water shortage is an issue, but they're solving it as a community. Um, and then we've been working closely with a company called Rehabilitation, so the people who make Dettol,
Mm,
and they've agreed to provide soap to all the schools that we're working with in India for the next 5 years
excellent.
as part of our program, which gives the schools time to find their own longer term solution. But now they're also helping us get soap into these poorer villages, small villages in particular, where it's a bite-sized chunk that a company like Dettol can get involved in. So
Right.
so these families are now washing their hands, being taught by their kids to do it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. The kids have become the teachers.
yeah,
With the adults, they've only known one way, right? And so
yes,
this is something totally foreign. If you teach the kids are excellent
yes,
teachers if
yeah,
the
yeah,
adults will learn. But, beyond hygiene here, there's this big, huge word called dignity.
yes,
One
yeah,
should be able to go to the
yeah,
bathroom, and
yes,
have some privacy and some
yeah,
dignity, and also not be afraid of being bitten by snakes,
yes,
and which is mind blowing.
yeah,
I imagine in certain places scorpions and a few other things,
mm,
but there's that dignity. You're placing value on the people, on that privacy of doing something
correct,
that we all do as human beings
correct,
and have a right
correct.
to do in privacy.
Yeah, and look, that issue of dignity is one of the big ones for us because, of course, the people most dramatically affected by a lack of acceptable standard of sanitation are girls and women. Uh,
Yes.
Privacy for adolescent girls becomes extremely important. The issue that men in the West, well, men in the world don't really talk about is menstruation. You know,
Right.
I remember when my daughter was about 13, I asked my wife, "Is everything okay?" She said yes. And that was kind of the last time we spoke about it because everything was okay. But in in many parts of the third world, if a father were to ask his wife, "Is everything okay?" for our daughter at that age, the answer would be no, no, it's absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
Um, so many girls don't have access to sanitary products,
Right.
whether you're talking disposable products like the sort that most women use in the West, or whether you're talking washable products like from organizations like Days for Girls who make washable sanitary pads, which are distributed throughout the developing world, or or girls and women who choose to use moon cups instead. And this is something men don't talk about.
No. Oh, no. Oh,
And in
la
the
la la
West,
la la la. No, they don't
and you
want
know
to
what?
hear about it.
And to some extent in the West, maybe we don't need to talk about it as much
Right.
because it's a private thing. This is
Hmm.
not this is a personal matter for girls and women, and it should remain personal and private. That's part of the dignity issue. But when the capacity of a country and a community is not there to allow that dignity and privacy, that's when men need to get involved as well. Men need to be Actually, I think men need to be standing on the hilltop screaming about it because we've got louder voices than women.
Well, that all depends. If you have a
We
pissed
can
off mom,
shout. That's
she can
true.
shout.
That's true. She can shout pretty loud too.
Don't cross a mama,
Never.
right? Um, but yeah, it is. The thing is, where the men should be is saying to the women, "What support do you need?" And then let
Yeah.
the women have that support to go and do what they
Yes.
need to do
Yes.
with this subject.
Yeah.
For guys,
Yeah.
it's unless you have daughters or wives, it's not something you comprehend at all.
Yeah.
But it is again a dignity and a privacy thing,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, we didn't ask for this. This
No.
is just the way we were made, and
Exactly.
there are so many things that a woman needs support on. And there was a wonderful Netflix movie called The Red Tent, and
Mm.
and the Red Tent is where the women went for support or gave birth or anything else that they needed, and no men were allowed. And I think we do need that community. It's not the male bashing area; it's the area where a woman can talk in her
Yes.
vulnerability with
Yes.
support of the sisterhood, and
Yes.
and not feel embarrassed
Yes.
because especially girls going to school, the embarrassment factor, it doesn't matter which country we're looking at, is
Mm,
extremely high, isn't it?
yeah, and I like the way you described that. Sometimes men seem to think that these private places for women are places for male bashing, but of course
Mm,
they're not for that. It is because sometimes women are coming from a position of disadvantage.
yes.
And when you come from a position of disadvantage, that's when you need support of your own network, people who truly understand it. I did want to tell you another story about another
Hmm.
school, which ties into this dignity issue. It's probably one of the more profound experiences I've had during my time working in this world of toilets. A friend took me to a little school in a village of about 300 people, and the school was just a primary school, about 25 kids. They were all 7, 8, 9 years old. And there's one teacher, a young woman about 25 years old, and the school didn't have a toilet. And so I asked the teacher through my interpreter how she managed, and she said, well, look, I live in another village about 2 hours away by bus. So I travel to work on the bus every morning. I work all day, then I travel home on the bus in the afternoon. And when I get home, the first thing I do is have a big drink of water. So she was telling me that she'd go all day without drinking
Yes.
water, even in the height of summer. And you mentioned this earlier,
Yeah.
women not drinking all day.
Right.
So even in the height of the Indian summer, wouldn't drink because she was afraid she might need to go to the toilet.
The
So
ramifications on that,
you
on
think,
kidneys
the
and your
impact on the
body.
kidneys,
Oh,
ability to concentrate, all sorts of
yes.
stuff,
You're dehydrating the body,
That's right.
all because you don't have a dignity of a washroom.
That's
Yeah.
right. So then I asked her, how she managed when she had her period. And she said, well, the children don't go to school on those days.
Mm,
So again, you think about what that means. That means, firstly, the children's education is being curtailed every
right.
time this young woman had her period. Uh, because they're primary school children, their mothers had to stay home from work to look after them
Hmm.
when the teacher had a period, which meant that, of course, their family incomes were being reduced every time the teacher had a period. And of course, the whole community knew every time this young woman had
Yes.
her period.
Yeah.
So her dignity was being absolutely smashed,
Yeah.
and and the whole community was paying the price.
Right.
And so I said to
All because of the lack of sanitary
Because
pads and
a
washrooms.
toilet.
Yes.
The reality is, because she was a teacher and had an income, she would be in a position to spend a little bit of money on some sanitary pads, or she could do what a lot of women in the third world do and use old rags or something. So
Mm.
she would have had a solution if she'd had a private place. Not a
Yes.
perfect solution, but a solution.
Yes.
So, so the guy who took me there and we sort of chatted about this for a bit and decided that we needed to do something about it. And so we figured, such a small school, primary age children only, and one female teacher only, we can get away with one toilet and one wash basin for them to share. In a perfect world, you want separate boys and girls facilities, separate teacher facilities, but we weren't looking for perfection. We were looking for something.
Solution. Yeah.
And so he said he could do it for about it was about $1,000 US. So I gave him 500 from my own pocket. No, actually, it was 1,000 Australian, so it's 700 US. So I
Hmm.
gave him 500 Aussie from my pocket, and he funded the other half. And he called me up about 3 months later. He said, Mark, I've got a message for you from the teacher. She wants you to know that the first thing she does when she gets to school now is have a big drink of water. And you think,
Yeah.
wow, just
Yeah.
something so simple. We
So
spent
simple.
$700.
Yeah.
And then not only that, but she said that the previous month was the first time that since she'd been working at the school that the kids had been able to go to school every day.
Right.
So we spent $700 and 300 lives have been changed. The mums can now work full
Yeah.
time. The kids' education's back on track, and she's drinking water and got a proper toilet to use. No one knows when she's got a period. It just suddenly just a bit of normality and dignity back in life, and for
Which
seven
we
hundred
take for
bucks.
granted,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think this is something that, so-called first worlds, just don't understand that, there are so many. How many million did you say were out, or billion were out of
Two
toilets in the
point
world?
2.5 billion.
And
Yeah,
there is meant to be 7 billion in the world. That look at the chunk of that,
7 to 8 billion. That's right.
right? I mean, that is
It's
an
so.
enormous chunk.
Yeah.
The ramifications are
We're worried about not having toilet paper in the West at the moment.
right.
Imagine if
Oh,
you couldn't find a toilet. Imagine if you
exactly.
couldn't find a toilet.
I know,
Much
and
worse.
this whole thing of the toilet paper thing. There's actually a wonderful post that went up on Facebook, and it's people saying a family presenting coronavirus, and they were all wrapped up in toilet paper. And you have to laugh because
Of
it's
course.
ridiculous. Again,
Yeah.
hysteria, fear
Yeah.
sells.
Yeah.
But we just, that many people in the world, without running water, without bathrooms. It's not just a question they don't have a loo. Imagine not being able to drink all day. Imagine, even if you had an emergency, you've got nowhere to go. For a woman, we certainly do. You can imagine, the menstrual cycle and not being able to do anything about that. But then imagine the trickle down economics that is happening,
Yep.
the education holes that are happening, the
Yep.
creativity and the production and the wellness of that village, of that town. It affects everybody, and all
Affects
for
everyone.
the fact of a toilet and some running water.
Yeah. And the way it affects people and everyone in the community are quite dramatic. I mean, first of all, I'll go back to a community I visited in Cambodia. 9% of the children in that village were dying before the age of 5. In a lot of the third world, the average is closer to 5%. This village had it particularly bad because they would go to the toilet in holes in the ground or on the side of the road, and in the wet season, the children would be walking around up to their waist in it.
Yes.
And when it was the dry season, the flies would be landing on it and then carrying it to people's food.
Yes.
And so it would take just one person in the village to go to the toilet outside. The whole village could get sick. So
Yep.
one of the most difficult aspects of this is it's not good enough to solve it for most people in the village. You've got to solve it for everyone.
It's the
I tried.
it's the domino effect, right? It's
It
the
is.
ripple out effect. You're not just talking about a toilet.
That's right.
We take it for granted. How many times a day do we go to our toilet and flush and wash our hands without even thinking about it?
That's
Now
right.
imagine you didn't have it. What would
Yeah.
be the impact on your life?
If someone told you, well, your kids have got a good chance of dying before the age of 5, we'd certainly be doing something about that problem here in the West. We wouldn't allow it to continue. And, we have this, I go back to the time of the Live Aid concert with Bob Geldof back in
The
whenever that
80s.
was with Ethiopia, where we'd see all these pictures of African mothers with their dying babies.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole world got involved, but there's still this arm's length thing where somehow people think that they're used to it. So for poor mothers from the third world, losing a child is different to losing a child
Yeah.
to a mother in the West. In fact,
Yeah.
it's probably worse because
Yeah.
here in the West we have support networks. We have strong government support for people going through trauma. In these countries, they're surrounded by other broken people who've also lost their children,
The
and
entire
so
system that is
yeah,
broken.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's actually harder, if anything, for a mother
And
in these countries.
the fact that maybe a simple antibiotic or the hygiene or toilet washing their hands could save their lives.
Yeah,
When you lose a life here, a child to cancer, a child to anything, we at least know that there was some medical that could
yeah,
help.
yeah,
Or at least that the child had a
yeah,
chance.
yeah.
Over there, what chance do they have at all, just from the basic
Yeah.
needs?
How many people in our countries die from diarrhea? Nobody.
Yeah, I know
It
if it
just
has to
doesn't
be an
happen.
extreme case of gastroenteritis and other underlining problems for that to
It's
happen.
so
But yeah,
unlikely, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Whereas in this community in Cambodia, that's what was killing them. The
yeah.
kids were dying from
It's
diarrhea,
very, yeah.
and so I hope your listeners aren't listening at breakfast time. Sorry about that.
Facts are the facts. This is, we get very complacent in our cushy lives where we have
Yeah,
everything. And,
yeah,
as human beings, we're inclined to moan a lot about
yeah,
what we don't have, but we're never grateful for what we do have. And just simply look at our ancestors. I mean, you look at period pieces. There's Outlander right now, a great show. And what I like about it is that they take a lot of historical things that are happening at that time. There were
mm,
no washrooms at that time,
no,
and the hygiene and everything else, and the amount of
mm,
people that died. It was
yeah,
just, nobody documented it. You were lucky if you reached puberty,
yeah,
because there's so many things that could kill you along the way. And that's why
yeah.
people had so many kids, because
Yeah.
for all of them to reach age,
Oh, 50 was
whereas
old. 50 was
50,
old then, wasn't
you
it?
were
Yeah,
definitely old. I would have been
yeah.
obsolete by now. So
There's two of us.
the point is, why do we take things for granted? We're looking at a world right now where we have so many opportunities. We have so much literally at our fingertips. And, it's not just the people in India and African countries. Look at the war-torn countries. Let's look at the refugees and look at what they're living in. And very
Mm,
often there's just in tents and kind of mud piles.
mm,
And, I know that, the person I was talking to about the portable toilets before, were trying to get them into refugee camps. Um, we, if we can't grant people the basic hygiene, then who are we as human beings to deny that?
yeah. Yeah, it's look, that's a very interesting issue. I visited Bangladesh a couple of years ago to see a project that my Rotary Club is involved in, providing operations for children born with cleft palates.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had an opportunity, which I wasn't able to take up at the time, but an opportunity to visit one of the refugee camps in Bangladesh, where the Karen refugees were coming in from Myanmar, from Burma, and there were 700,000 refugees into Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world, and they were dealing with a humanitarian crisis on a scale of that size, and trying to solve a sanitation problem for these people when they had sanitation problem for their own people. And
Right.
the the dysentery and other
Oh,
stomach diseases in these refugee camps were just beyond the
rampant,
pale. Yeah,
rampant. Yeah.
rampant. Yeah,
And, how do you put a stop to it? And you really have to kind of scrub everything down and get those toilets and running water in there.
yeah,
And it's almost more important than the food.
yeah.
Obviously the food is important, but what good is the food if it's going right through them?
Go straight through. And
Right.
look, I mean, the reality, the problems that humanity face, whether it's sanitation and water, whether it's literacy, whether it's maternal and child health, whether it's peace and conflict resolution, the problems that humanity faces are just, they're too big to take them all on and solve them all. But
Yeah.
we can pick away at them. We can solve
Yeah.
bits of them here and there. And I think that, the one of the questions that I asked myself very early on in this journey was, I'm only one person. How much impact can I have?
Hmm.
And look, if you look on a global scale, the impact any one person can have, unless you're Bill Gates, is not that big. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to have an impact, because even if you can change 10 lives, 100, 1,000 lives,
Yeah.
whatever, you're still making the world a better place.
It is like people listening to the show right now.
Mm,
Even if all that comes out of this is a gratitude for running water, paying
mm,
attention for the
yes.
toilet, maybe
Yeah.
supporting your organization with a donation that will make a difference. The
Mm,
whole point is waking people up to the fact that in 2020, we
mm,
still have that amount of billion people in the world without running water and without toilets.
yeah.
And it should not be. Nobody should be going hungry. Nobody should be out there with the basic needs in life. Nobody should be without a home. Not in this world. Again,
Mm,
it's an imbalance of money, it's an imbalance of power, and we spend more money on war than we do on
mm,
creativity and on supporting our human nation. And it's not, don't point to the politicians. Three fingers are pointing back at you. What can you do? And no, don't take on everything. Find something that you want to support and be an advocate for it.
mm,
Share it
mm,
on your social medias. Invite other people to know the awareness of it. Get other people to make $1 donation. If you've got 100 people, that's $100.
that's right.
It's every single drop in the ocean counts. But don't sit back and go, oh, that's not nice. Well, I'm glad I've got a loo. It's for the people that don't.
Yeah.
Please, four-letter word, care.
Yeah, look, I think
Care.
a bit of compassion for other people,
Yeah.
people in greater need than ourselves, is it's actually good for your own personal well-being too.
Yeah.
It's,
Oh,
so
boy, is
yeah,
it.
I can recommend it highly. As a result of that visit to the slum school where there were no girls in the school, I actually ended up selling my business, and I haven't had an income for the last 6 years. I'm let's say spending the kids' inheritance
But you're
on.
enriching their souls and
Yeah, look,
abandon their spirit.
they like what I'm doing. They
Yes.
like the importance of the work I'm doing, and they and my wife all acknowledge that I'm a much happier person now than I was
Yeah.
when I was chasing a dollar. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember having staff where I'd give them a pay rise, and everyone would be very pleased to get a pay rise. But within a few days, they were just back where they were. It was the same job,
Yes.
and suddenly the excitement about that extra $30 a week in your pay packet really became irrelevant. You still had to go to work and do that same thing every day. And if you weren't enjoying your life, if you weren't doing something that you felt was productive and worthwhile, and you didn't have a nice boss and a good working environment, all that, the extra money meant nothing.
Yeah. And it's I've done a lot of interviews over the year, and one of them is an East Indian gentleman who actually was an aero engineer. And he had a health issue, and from that learned about this particular MLM company, and that product changed his life. So he decided to change his career, and he started being an MLM. But what he did is he started, teaching people how to be it, and he's ended up in the third world countries, specifically helping women develop their own business, selling products that are not only good for them, but also make them an income. So they don't have to marry for position. They've got their own money to support their families. They've got that liberty and that freedom. And this has now become his calling. If somebody said to you a few years ago, hey, mate, you're going to be in the toilet business, what would you have said?
I would have looked at them very strangely. My wife will tell you quickly that I don't like cleaning toilets at home. I've become better at it. I've become better at it through total embarrassment that my life's completely in the toilet. I should clean them sometimes.
Exactly, exactly. You never know what is going to redirect us.
No,
That's our self-discovery. The thing is that nothing is wasted. Whatever years you did before, you take that expertise, you take that knowledge, and you apply it to something that really is meaningful to you in the moment. And you don't know if you started off with one school and you saw the difference, and then, well, what else can we do? Where else can we go? Who else's life can we change? And then it becomes that wonderful snowball effect. And that energy begets energy. That inspiration becomes invitation.
Yeah. Well, look, we've been doing this. I took this idea to a Rotary Club in Melbourne just as a guest speaker 6 years ago, and by the end of the presentation, they'd pretty much convinced me that I'd be able to do more if I were to join them. And we've directly impacted on 100,000 lives since then in the last 6 years. And indirectly, I can count it indirectly, but very measurable at close to 500,000.
Yes.
And give it another couple of years, we will have reached 1 million people for sure. And that's all just from just an idea, and instead of sticking to that question, I'm only one person, what can I do? I won't do anything. Saying, well, no, maybe I can do something. And from that, then surrounding myself with amazing people to help turn this idea into something real. And look, in the scheme of things, globally, 1 million is still just a drop in the ocean. But yeah, it's 1 million people who've got better lives now because of it. So,
and then their lives, of their children's lives are better, and their children's lives are better, and opportunities and industries are created, and it's something that will get beyond the measurement, because it will be so far-reaching, and all because of a toilet and running water, and it's something we all take for granted. And I love it when people, find that meaningful purpose in their lives, because there's such,
lucky.
it's being willing to follow, what's in front of you without questioning it, and then, questioning it when you need to, as to what can I do about it.
Look, I was lucky. It was the right time in my life when I found this thing, because my first job out of university, I was a writer for Lonely Planet Publications. So I spent a lot of time in the developing world. I often saw people, now that I look back, I realize I often saw people out the window of my train going to the toilet in the fields.
Yes.
But I never extrapolated, well, what does that mean? And then I just happened to visit this school at the right time in my life where I needed to find out what it meant. And I didn't like what I found, which is why I felt I needed to do something about it.
Yeah. That goes for everybody out there. As far as I'm concerned, our self-discovery is discovering what instrument we are in life. And then once we've got that instrument, learning to play it and finding our orchestra. And with that orchestra, collectively creating a symphony that raises everyone up. And we don't know, our journey is about chapters. Our book isn't one chapter, it's many chapters of our lives, and all the experiences and the discovery and the exploration that we've made through our life, leads us somewhere. Will you always be, the toilet advocate? Maybe you'll branch off into something else, but where you are right now. I could see you've been very busy with this for a long time to come. But you don't know where else it's going to go or who else
Yep.
is going to go. Well, you've done 100,000 already. It's affected 500,000 people. Let's put more money behind this, more
Mm,
industry behind this, and make sure that we're talking millions now.
mm.
And well, that's all you need.
Yeah, and look, your that question you asked is, whether I will be doing this same thing in a few years or not. I'm actually involved in another project fighting slavery. Because
Oh,
slavery is a huge problem around the world today. Most people would not know that there are more slaves alive today than were trafficked to North America during the entire time of the slave trade in the
now are you
16th,
talking,
1700s.
slaves of color? Are you talking sex trade, slavery?
There's probably 70% would be sex trade, but there are a lot of people in the developing world in slavery
Yeah.
in the fishing industry and in agriculture and in making bricks and brick kilns and
Well,
uh,
what about the children in mining for the
children.
components for cell phones?
Yep, yep,
All of that type of thing.
yep.
And
So
the
the
sex
scale of
trade
it's
is
huge.
the sex trade itself is, as of 2 years ago, $150 billion a year worldwide.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? 150. If that is not a pandemic,
yeah,
if that is not a sickness, I don't know what is.
yeah.
And it's across the board, whether it's sex trade
Mm,
workers or children, trafficking and everything else.
yeah,
But it is, it really makes us question. I mean, as
mm,
human beings, we could be the scourge, we could be the virus, the pandemic on this planet. We also can be the creators,
and the
and
cure,
the cure. It
and the
really
cure.
is up to
Yeah,
what we're going to feed and what we
yeah,
choose to. But we can't leave people behind. I have a
yeah,
series called Our Forgotten Children, and it
yeah.
is about if we don't invest in our kids, they become the problem of tomorrow through no
Yeah.
fault of their own.
Hmm.
70% of um, foster children end up in jail. 70% of the people in jail are foster children.
Goodness.
And that's because nowhere along the line did they ever develop any compassion for them or empathy for them, or somebody investing in them and showing them that there is something more in life. And they get
Mm,
caught up in that same spiral. So yeah, it's the slavery factor is I'm glad you're going down that
mm.
road. It's not, again, like toilets, nothing pretty.
Look, what we're
A
doing is
different
getting
sewage.
involved in. We're getting involved. Yes, exactly. We're getting very yes, right on the spot with that. So we're getting involved in prevention through
Hmm.
education. There are three areas of importance when you're fighting slavery. One is prevention, which really is about primarily that's about educating uh, communities and families about the risks of particularly their children
Hmm.
being trafficked, and also the risks of young women being trafficked, and of men, young men being trafficked, for instance, into agriculture
Yeah.
or into the fishing industry and so on. Um, so education is the easiest place to start. It's prevention.
Yes.
Uh, the next one that people are looking at on a fair scale is um, we'll call it the treatment after the event. So what's that? What would that be? That's rehabilitation.
Hmm.
So of rescued slaves.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, because
terribly important. But these people come back, young women who've been trafficked from Nepal into India into the sex trade for a number of years. When they come back to Nepal, they're broken and they need a lot of help
and
to
they're
get
never
it.
going to be whole again.
No,
It's it is quite horrific. I mean, not only have you taken away their childhood, you've taken away their dignity, their
that's
liberty,
right.
the
That's right.
programming that they're worthless, that
Yeah,
they're
that's
nothing.
right. That's right.
There's so much there. It's not a question of just love and a little therapy and they're going to be all right. This will be a
Yeah,
lifelong thing
that's right.
and they will probably never live up to their full potential unless they're
Yeah,
one of those few that are the fighting spirit. But
that's right.
there's just so many of them that are
Yeah.
damaged beyond repair.
That's right. The third part of the battle against slavery is the most dangerous one, and that's rescue. There are some organizations out there rescuing people, but that is incredibly dangerous because, of course, you're up against organized crime.
Yes.
Uh, there's a guy called Kailash Satyarthi who's an Indian-born Nobel Peace Prize winner. I think he's the only Indian-born Nobel Peace Prize winner. And Mother Teresa won a Nobel Peace Prize, but she
Hmm.
wasn't born in India. Um, Kailash won it the same year that Malala Yousafzai won it. the young Pakistani girl who was shot in the head for
Right.
basically for wanting to go to school.
Yeah.
And Kailash's organization has rescued about 100,000 slaves, and they put themselves at risk every day when they're doing this work. But and so it's that kind of person wins a Nobel Peace Prize. It's that kind of.
Right.
So and I actually was lucky enough to meet him a few years ago, and I spoke about toilets and he spoke about slaves, and on the same stage, which was pretty exciting. So, I felt like a bit of an imposter being on the stage with a guy like that.
Oh,
But
no,
very
no, no,
exciting.
no.
So.
We've just talked about that, it stems from hiding, right? All
Yeah.
liberation, it
Yes.
comes from the
Yes.
hiding, the dignity and the respect and, the hiding base of it. I've interviewed quite a number of people on sex trade, and one of them is called The Abolitionist. They did a movie on it. He worked with the CIA for 20 years and then went out on his own group, and they would go in pretending they're Johns and then capture the people and rescue the kids. But, he was saying some of the horrific things that they've seen, and they have a number of how many people they rescue, but for every time they rescue someone else is being captured, so it's an ongoing thing. But
Yeah.
someone's got to give a damn, and this is not something we talk about. We don't talk about hygiene, we don't talk about toilets, we don't talk about running water, we don't talk about slavery, we don't talk about sex trade, and we need to. I know it's uncomfortable, there is nothing pretty about this at all, but if we bury our heads in the sand of it, we are part of the problem, because we
Absolutely.
refuse to be part of the solution.
Yeah, it won't go away if we
No.
don't stand up and shout about it and say this isn't good enough. Yeah.
Yeah. This is what we do here, on the
Yeah.
Self-Discovery Media and Discovering Communities.
Yep.
This is what we do here. We bring these subjects to you because education of what's going on in the world is important
Yep.
for you to know too, for you to
Yep.
support, or for you to share, or for you just to even speak with your family about. And it's an invitation. The
Yep.
inspiration of what you're doing today is an invitation for people to participate, whether they get completely in it and become part of the organization, or whether it's just a donation, whether it's sharing the show, talking. Imagine if you brought this to the classroom and you said to the classroom, okay, there are kids without toilets. Let's do a fundraiser and awareness for the whole school to see how much money we can raise to go through that. Imagine
Yep.
the impact it would have on the kids, have
Yep.
on the parents, have
Yep.
on the results on
Yep.
the other end. I mean, how empowering for everybody involved.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with schools.
Mm-hmm.
I speak at schools a few times a year, and I don't know if it's the same over where you are, but in Australia, particularly in private schools, kids wear a uniform,
Mm-hmm.
and so they'll have once a term there'll be a day where they can come in their weekend clothes, and they have to put some money in a tin. So you pay $5 or $2 or whatever it is to be allowed to wear a casual clothes day.
Right.
And they use that to raise money for charity that they choose for the year. And they do other fundraising things during the year as well. And there's one school here in Melbourne raised $8,000 for us last year during the year.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so
Wonderful.
it just shows kids really understand this stuff. Particularly the adolescent kids.
Yeah.
The girl, when they hear these stories, the girls, they stand back in shock and say, "Well, that's not fair."
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Until they're aware, they're not invited to do something about it. So
Yep.
first and foremost is the awareness out there.
Yep.
The awareness that this is a solution that's easily resolved.
Yep.
But it requires participation from everybody on whatever degree, on whatever level. If you can't immerse yourself into it because there's something else you're being supportive of, that's okay. But then how about sharing it that maybe somebody else would become an important topic for? But we can't, the monkey not see, do, hear, or anything else. It's when we're looking at such an easy solution of toilets and running water. Obviously, the trafficking is a lot harder. But again, when you educate the children, you're giving them a way out.
Yes.
You're giving them a way that their parents don't sell them, which is a lot happens too. And we're giving them an option. And also when they're at school, harder to be snatched than them just out there in the street. A lot of things here have got the solution to it all. And it's just a question of what are we going to do to participate in it?
Yeah. Look, I have a fairly basic philosophy that I apply to everything that I do. And that is, if you don't ask the question, the answer is never yes.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple philosophy, but so powerful you can apply it
Yes.
to anything.
Yeah. Stop worrying about the no, right?
I'm actually going to use it to show this to you.
Yeah, yes, the book.
For people who don't have a screen now, it's my book, Toilet Warrior. I asked a guy in India in November, would you buy 1,000 copies of it? And he was shocked, and he said yes. If I hadn't asked him, he wouldn't have bought 1,000 copies.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, stop. We worry so much about the no, don't we?
Yeah.
If somebody
Oh,
says no,
and
fine,
by the
dismiss it and
way,
go look to the yeses.
yeah, I should say the profits are all going into my project. So.
Right, of course. But one would assume that with you, definitely. And 1,000 books, how many toilets does that provide?
That will solve the problem for a school of about 600 kids.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
look at that impact. Look at
Yeah.
that impact.
Not
Where
bad,
can
eh?
people buy the book?
So my book is available at toiletwarrior.net. It's also available on Amazon. I've also recorded an audio book of it if you want to keep listening to my dulcet tones. And there's an ebook, of course, which you would find on Amazon. And yeah, that's where you get it. And my broader, all-encompassing website called The Smallest Room. Probably the smallest room.club. But anyway, that website's currently in development. So at the moment, toiletwarrior.net is the place to find the book. But watch this space for the all-encompassing website.
Right. And how do you have social media or anything to share?
Yes. So this Toilet Warrior is a Facebook page. And also the project that we run in my Rotary Club is called Operation Toilets. There's a website for Operation Toilets, and there's also a Facebook page for Operation Toilets. We're still trying to get our head around social media. There's so many options with Twitter and Instagram and others that I don't understand, and Facebook, of course. And you could spend your life just posting, couldn't you?
I will admit, part of my business is to spend at least an hour or two a day, on the posting, on the interaction, on the participation, right, on the invitation. Yeah, it is that networking. So yeah, it does work, but you have got to be willing to put the time and effort into it, and because it is about not just posting something, but sharing and inviting other people to share. And I mean, you just put out a post there and saying, that many million people without toilet and running water.
Yep.
What impact do you think it has? And invite people to write their comments.
Yes.
Because that's, that you want to get people talking about it.
That's right.
I didn't know that many people in the world. Yeah. No. I didn't know that many people in the world didn't have toilets. I knew that there were many areas, and I knew India because I'd done a show on that, Africa because I've done a show on that, because somebody was doing a porta toilet. So at least they didn't have to just go into the ground. They would still go into the ground, but they would dig a ground and have actually a seat that was self-cleaning that they could actually sit on, which gave them more dignity. And that came from a student, who was at university, who decided that this was important. But it's the last thing we think about, toilets and running water, because it's so here for us. And imagine, go for a day without it. See how you last.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's this little room we go into, spend as little time there as we can possibly manage, and then we get out quickly.
Yes, exactly. Now imagine you don't have it. Imagine you've got to go somewhere where somebody can see you and you can't wash your hands, and then there's all the hygiene factor behind it, right? So please, folks, step outside of your comfort zone, right? And would you want this for yourself? Would you want this for your children? No? Then how about saying to the whole family, okay, instead of pocket money this week, let's put it in a kitty and let's see how much we can raise and buy somebody a toilet.
Imagine.
You can, I mean, from my children this year, I bought a wheelchair and gifted that from my children for Christmas. And having that as a program on your site where people can buy a toilet and donate that, but they can do it as gifting it to someone. So instead of buying somebody a useless gift, they can gift a toilet to someone from that person in that person's name.
Yes, we would always accept gifts like that.
Exactly. But setting it up that people can gift that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
because that way, I'm going to gift a toilet, I'm going to gift 2 toilets, I'm going to gift 3 toilets, and it's going to be as a birthday gift or an anniversary gift to someone, and say, look at the difference you've just made in someone's life. Happy birthday.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Very
and
good.
it really does work. And that's where also you can use Facebook with events of having a toilet raising fund of on events of, you know, we want to reach this amount for these amount of toilets for this school. Have a picture of the school, even pictures of the kids, and a blurb on what it's all about, and invite people to donate. And when they understand the difference it makes, most of the time people don't do anything because they simply don't know.
Yeah, that's right. And it comes back to that idea. If you don't ask the question, the answer can never be yes. It's the same sort of concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But people
It
have
is.
to know about it before they can decide whether or not to act.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the toiletwarrior.net.
Yep.
You've also done a TED Talk, which is here on your
Yes.
posting, so people can read,
Yep.
look at that.
Great.
Operationtoilets.org.au for Australia.
Yes.
And then you've got the Box Hill Control
Box Hill
Rotary.org.
Central. Box Hill Central.
Sorry, Central. I'm reading it without my glasses. So Box Hill Central Rotary.org.au. And Facebook, you've got TIT Warrior, short for toilet.
TLT.
Is it TFC? Sorry, you have to tell me. I haven't got my glasses on. And then for Facebook, We Cannot Wait.
Yes, I couldn't get We Can't Wait. Someone in America had that as their page. They were having a baby about 7 years ago. They got and they got that Facebook address and kept it. Haven't
Well,
used it
you know,
since.
cannot is the proper way of saying
Yes,
it.
that's right. That's right. Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Mark. This has been so enlightening, and
Oh, thanks.
I'm certainly sharing your show along with, you know, my Indian counterparts that I've interviewed, and there's Miguel, who has done so much. He's actually a journalist. He's an environmental journalist, and he's the one that did on, you know, toilets and everything else. And I certainly want him to know about your project
Oh,
because
great.
you're all in it together. And
Yes.
you know, and please, folks, please, it doesn't matter, you know, how big the donation is. You know, he's going to set up a Facebook donation page.
Yes.
Drop a few dollars. Those few dollars adds up. You know, you can put in how many dollars makes for each toilet. And just think about it. There's somebody who can go to school because there's a toilet there.
Yep.
The hygiene of not getting sick is because they have water now. And you think about
Yep.
that coronavirus out there right now, and literally the hygiene, the cleansiness of not touching anything literally can save your life. Well, think about what it can do for a child's life, for a community's life, and how it can make their lives better. Think about that for a moment, and then tap into your consciousness and dip into your wallet.
Thanks so much for saying that, Sarah. And that's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed having a chat.
I have to. Thank you very much for what you're doing. It's very, very important. You know, your story matters, and you know, this is an environmental issue. This is a humanitarian issue. You know, this is a logical hygiene issue. There's so many issues here, and every single one of them has a solution if we are all willing just to step up and just be a part of it.
Yep,
In
absolutely.
whatever way. In
And
whatever way.
it'll make you feel really good too. So you could almost say you're being selfish by doing it.
Yes, exactly. There is somebody that's going to school because of you.
Yep.
There's somebody's life being saved because of the hygiene of a toilet and running water. If that doesn't make you feel good, nothing will.
Yep. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you so much. And to everyone else, remember, this isn't everybody else's problem. This is the whole planet's problem. If we have sickness, we have slavery, we have disease, we have people being uneducated in the world. It affects all of us in the end. So let's all of us be the solution. One drop in the bucket, a whole bucket, whatever you feel like. But please step up and be a part of this. Share the show, get educated, invite the support, and let's see what we can do in making a difference in the lives of others. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. Do visit us at www.discoveringcommunities.org and see all the other wonderful shows that we have on our Orchard of Wisdom on Self-Discovery. And do check out our mentors with all the wonderful services they have for you. Until next time.